Hey everybody, this is Linda Misegatis, and you're listening to An Unconventional Guide to Success, the show that talks about real life with real people for those of you who are interested in learning from others the steps they took on their journey towards success as defined by them.
There's the mascot, and then there's the talent.
That's right. Oh my goodness. So, hey everyone, we are so excited to be back with An Unconventional Guide to Success. I'm excited to be in the studio with my good friend and colleague and co-host Scott Montgomery, and our guest today, Lawrese Brown. Hey everyone.
Hey everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome to the studio.
Lawrese, it's so good to see you. It's been a few months. Yes. We are so excited to unpack what is going on in your world. Yeah. It is so amazing to watch what you're revealing and unveiling. So please, yeah.
I think I'm like most people right now in terms of pivoting, and because of changes that are happening demographically and in the economy. So last time I was here, I talked to you all about the book, I Don't Have to Go to College, Discover Well-Paying Jobs That Don't Require a 4-year college degree. And while the book did, it contributed to this conversation that people are having at a much higher level. I think every week we see a new headline from someone saying Americans have lost confidence in the value of a 4-year college degree. What are the majors that are the most profitable? Who do we hold accountable for employability outcomes? All of these things, we're seeing it. It certainly contributed to that larger conversation. But the biggest piece I got out of it, both in working with students and then testing it in schools, is we put the cart before the horse, and that we talk about college before we even talk about career options. And the best way anyone can get an ROI, a positive ROI on their 4-year college degree or any credential is, well, what is the job that it maps to in the market? Yeah. And so that's been the biggest shift that came out of it for me, was recognizing for students, overloading them with saying, hey, you can go to a trade school, a boot camp, or a 4-year college or 2-year college, helpful, but not as impactful as saying, you know what, if you want to be in healthcare, then, there's lots of jobs that don't require a 4-year college degree, as noted in the book, right? Whether that's a radiation tech or a surgical tech or a phlebotomist. Same thing for, we more traditionally think of the trades, but same thing for data and tech. So what that big takeaway told me is, okay, yes, it's about information, but it's really about the economy. Because one of the biggest market failures, right, and this is a very economic term, is information asymmetry. Like some people, who gets the information and when do they get it? And what that got me thinking of is, in this digital age, students do get a lot of information online. And what I learned in the process is that it's more helpful, or at least I see it as a stronger theory of change, to go to the students and say, listen, you need to understand what the formula is to get an ROI on your college education. You need to understand what factors influence whether or not you will get a BA level job in the market, which, by the way, I will plug this and say, now they just found more research that said that if you don't, that I think, what is it? We know 33% of all college graduates are underemployed, but I think about, it was a large number, higher than, I think about 52%. No, some number, maybe even 70, right? But that some number 1 year after they've graduated, they still don't have a BA level job. And what they found is, of that percentage, if you don't get a BA level job 1 year after you've graduated, the likelihood of you getting, 10 years later, you still won't have a BA level job.
Wow.
So that's a significant statistic, because it really says if you don't get an immediate ROI on your degree, it's more challenging for you to get it in the long term. So again, all that to say, a lot of important anecdotal data, but I think students see it more than adults do. People who go to college and end up working at the Starbucks, and then you start off there and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to use it to get some income in. But then, we all go home tired at the end of the day. And so what's the likelihood
I start my days tired, Lawrese. I start my days tired. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. But think about that, right? Where students are thinking, the advice they hear, just get something, get your foot in the door. But that's something, we say that as if it's just a short-term remedy, but we're realizing that's actually setting people on a long-term path. But all these anecdotal things help me realize, okay, how do we help students understand the formula of the economy, of like, how do you actually go from education, which is correlation, not causation, for getting an economic return or economic mobility? And the factors that we found are, understanding of the major and how it maps to the market. There's also age, right? Right now there is a focus on trying to get older people back into, to get them to upskill. But really, on average, it takes about 20 years to see that million that people say you're going to get. If you do successfully get a BA level job in the 4-year college degree, right? So ideally, the younger you are in completing your degree, the more likely you are to get an ROI on it, or at least see that. The other factors that they talk about are geography. Now, like Scott and Linda, think about how many times you've heard of a growing field.
Mm-hmm.
Every state is so different. So imagine if you're like, I want to do cybersecurity, but then you go home to like Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana. Where are you going to get that cybersecurity job?
Right.
Or do you know there are certain healthcare hubs, right? So it's like there's also a thinking around geography we have to give students to say, well, if you're going to go back home, not only what is the job you want to do, but is that job available
at home?
Right. At home, right?
Right.
Sounds simple, but it's really not, right? We get these things and we're almost in a vacuum. Like, oh, I want to be this. Well, like, can you do that where you live?
I remember when I was growing up, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I don't know why, because I'm not even like a huge, like the idea of that. But then I did have that thought, exactly what you're saying. It's like, I live in Colorado. Like, I'm not going to move to the coast. And so why would I want a degree in marine biology? And so, it's such a great point. And I think about that, when you were saying that, I was like reflecting back a little bit, like, yeah, that's a really valid point. And like, can you even do that job that you're going after if you stay in this geography? Wow. How insightful is that?
Yeah. It really is insightful. And that's one of the things I like about Lawrese is she's thinking about it holistically and not in this go with the flow, school of fish mentality of just go do this way. And it's so unconventional and so important to evaluate these things. One of the things that's coming up for me, Lawrese, how do you get all this data? My God, so many data points.
So, and sometimes you're like, these seem to contradict. So what am I missing here?
No. I always understand data holistically, but I understand you got a lot of it.
Yes. So the thing about data that I'm learning, so I read, and my emphasis where the pivot came from, as I said, underneath all this or external to all this is policy. And we don't talk enough about that. And I think initially, like most people, we want to put things in K through 12, or at least that's where I thought. I was like, oh, this sits nicely here. Anybody in K through 12 will tell you they have so many competing priorities, especially since the pandemic, not only around literacy and numeracy, right?
Safety,
exactly. That, it is, I'm not going to say unfair, but it is another ask that they may or may not be able to do. But the policy does point to you all's point around workforce development. We talk about geography and not in this ambiguous way that I think we all like workforce development. That seems to be this dump of like businesses need talent, and do students know about the talent, and how do we incentivize businesses to come, get the tax break to build here? Those things are a part of it. But I think more so, if you think even larger, when we start talking about the demographics and then even what happened so it's like this, from 1980 to 2012, speaking of those data points, right? We did the narrative of college or bust was the biggest. And it was really around, we're moving into this service-based economy. But if you remember 2008, 2009, we had the recession, where everybody was like, go to school. You're not going to get a job. Go for more schooling, right? And now everybody, when you look broadly, what we're realizing is, okay, now, yes, that happened, but that also contributed to already what was becoming a demographic cliff in America, which is this idea that we are having fewer and fewer children. And now we're having fewer children than the replacement rate, right? So there's not enough people having children to even sustain where we are now.
Wow.
So when you look at all this, right? So when I'm looking at all this, I'm like, okay, we're talking about college, and college not necessarily the challenge of getting ROI on college. Underneath it, what we're realizing is part of what we created in this narrative of college for all is there's a lot of jobs, many, I think I read 7 out of 10 that don't require a 4-year college degree. Now we have these openings here. Okay, now even external to these businesses who need certain talent that you actually have to get to earlier, sooner rather than later, so they know the job exists.
And you get an ROI 5 years from now or 20 years from now, right?
We're also looking at the fact that there's going to be a bigger war for talent because there's just fewer of it, right? There's fewer people being born, which brings up this larger issue in workforce development of, of course there's AI, but to me, AI is taking away actually the college jobs.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's true.
But we really have to think as a country and in our communities of how do we meaningfully put people to work under the recognition of some jobs are available that don't require a 4-year college degree, and they are family sustaining wage, right? The other piece that we're up against is certain jobs or certain communities. There are demographic cliffs, or there's dying communities that we're up against. And so how do we even think about not only putting those people to work, but in thinking about, well, where can they actually go get work at? A great example of that is Oakland. Have you all heard about Oakland and how the jobs come in there because of safety, right? It's very difficult for businesses to operate there. So now it's essentially becoming an economic desert, right? Wow. So basically what we're all talking about is fundamentally we all have to get to know our communities.
Well, the expectations of said communities, right? And how we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Bingo. There you go. That's one of the things.
You know what's well, and Larissa, what an interesting concept. You know, my son's applying for college right now. So ironic, right? My son is applying for college. He applied to 9 schools rather, not 19. And he went through an application called the Common App. I don't know if you're familiar with this Common App. It is killing kids getting into schools that align with what you've been talking about, because kids are just applying to every school they think is the weather's good in. And so then these kids get accepted, and then they hold the spot and they don't go there. But then the kid that aligns with that college doesn't get in for whatever reason. And so there was 100,000 applicants in one college that my son was coveting, and he did not get in. His GPA wasn't strong enough, but half the people he knew wouldn't have gone there anyway.
Yeah.
And it was specialized in things like marine biology or whatever the topic is, which would have then aligned to an economic need and not a situation or an expectation that the generation built around college requirements.
Yes.
So there's all these interesting layers.
Well, and I'm curious, Lawrese, when you look at this, sometimes I think about how much sometimes things come full circle. Because if you think about way back in the day, the way that the country was kind of partitioned off was a little more geographically driven towards different types of economic drivers. Like I remember Colorado's economy was primarily on oil and gas. Like that was the big thing here. And then when the oil and gas industry kind of tanked a little bit, downtown Denver was desolate. And when it had to rebuild, they're like, we have to diversify our economic focus. So we can't just be solely focused on one industry. But then to your point, it kind of feels a little bit like still we almost need to go back to looking at some of that from the lens of what does make sense in particular geographies, right? From a job perspective or an economic perspective. Yeah. Because to your point, like cybersecurity is probably not going to take off in the states like Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana. So where do we want to put that focus? And that's not a bad thing either. I think some of that is like it's viewed negatively, just the same way as like trade jobs started to be viewed as negatively. Like we were just talking about this the other day. Well, if all you want to do in your life is flip burgers, then I guess don't go to college. And we made the idea that working in these jobs was somehow negative and that you were less than if those are the jobs that you chose to work in, or that maybe those were the jobs that you were most qualified to work in, and that's not a terrible thing. So I'm curious, like,
so it's expectation.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research on the narrative, right? Cultural narrative is the reason why we're in the position we are now. Absolutely, Linda. We set up the idea that the highest social standing you can get and the preferred educational standing you should get is from a 4-year college degree. And we don't realize that sets up a narrative for us where we've discriminated against people, right? It's you're lesser than. We attribute negative stereotypes or negative associations.
Horrible.
And that's what's making, even for students today, that's what we don't realize. We dug the hole that we're in. That's what's making this conversation more complicated. Yeah. That's why there's no nuance in it. Because to your point, Linda, you go to people and you're like, well, students don't have to go to college to be successful. And then people are like, yeah, there's trades. I'm like, nope, there's more than that, right? So one, you're up against the jobs, but then also to your point, then people hear, if you don't say college, are you telling students to stop at high school?
Right.
I don't know where you got that assumption from, but that's not what I would recommend for anybody to do in today's economy. Or then you get, to me, the biggest gap, and this is what we're talking about here, and Scott, even what you're talking about with your son in marine biology, and Linda, what you're talking about is, when do we start to say, yes, well, where's the line between this is about education and this is about employment outcomes? Like, when does that shift happen? And that to me is policy, and that's what workforce development.
Interesting.
If they can answer one question that I think would shift us as a society and actually allow people for individual counseling, because this is is what America is all about, right? The American dream. I can accomplish more here. The position I'm in now does not have to be my final stand. But that is not entirely on education. I think we have to accept that, and we have to ask, when does it become about, let's counsel you around the factors that are going to influence your economic output, your employability, and then your long-term financial security.
I love that you're focusing on policy, Lawrese, because I think that's such a great point when you think about we talked before, there really needs to be an overhaul of the education system. And a lot of it is because it is so rooted and steeped in old ways of doing things, very much on, tradition, and it's time that changes, because we are also losing our ability to be competitive with other countries because we are not evolving our education system, the way we do things, how we view things, because we're kind of stuck in that that traditionalism. Like we want to
well, that traditionalism. And just to expand on that too, I think, Linda, what's interesting from my perspective is what Lawrese was saying earlier about the expectations of these schools being daycares. Also, the expectation that they have piled on safety, government issues, education criteria, all the things, food, safety, meal plans, all the stuff. It's like they're going to explode. And it's in the Constitution that this education's required. So that's the tradition of it. But somehow we've made everything constitutional.
Right.
And put it in the school, right?
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy. So how do you implement?
What are you going to do, Lawrese? I'm short of taking over the world.
Linda's got me.
Like, where are you going with all of this?
Well, and how can we help?
Well, this is what you realize helps is that we're up against the deficit, or like everybody's like, there's YouTube. Of course, there's lots of information out there. But what I found is that the information is not enough. Even for students, right? Students who were undecided. I did a pre and post survey to put in context. Students who were undecided before reading the book were undecided after reading.
Oh, interesting.
And what that showed me was, because information, that action is different than information, right? Experience is what you actually need to move from I'm undecided to decided. And so when people talk, I'm saying that to say, a lot of people are like, there's information everywhere. Lots of information, less application. And you'll hear this when people say, don't just read the book, go do something about it. But I do think, Scott and Linda, to your point, we have to look at high school. You see this thing where people look at high schools as, some people will call them college preparatory schools. They'll say work explicitly focused on college. Okay. Well, it can be
let me offer you something. My son's in one of them. It didn't make a difference.
What? Well, it
did not make a difference in the college application process. It did not. It's crazy.
But it does make a difference in what they will focus on.
That's
meaning
true.
Like their exploration, no matter what, they're probably not going to explore options that don't require a 4-year college.
Yeah.
So that's the point.
Fair. Good point. Thank you. Because I was like, we don't. It's crazy.
No, absolutely. But I think under the current policy, right, that came from No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top, and all of what makes a high school effective is how many people are you sending to college? We absolutely have to shift that. I think and we have to expand it. I think in New York, it's either enrollment in a college, enlistment in the military, or employment. Or employment. But there's far more options than that, right? When we consider apprenticeships, or we consider other pathways, and we just have not caught up yet to students' lived experience, or not, even if you don't call it students' lived experience, all the ways you can be skilled to participate in the economy. We're just not there yet. So
the pathways.
Yes, I'd love to see policy change around pathways. But even more importantly, I'd love to see more conversations like this where we tell students that are like, listen, yes, what is the degree or program you're going to be in? What is the geographic location you're going to participate in? What are other experiences that you need? And also, you can't minimize social capital. Right? That's another piece of it. Is like, it's all great, get the degree. At the same time, this is an economy built on relationship. And what types of experiences do you need to build while you're still in school so that people know you exist, that people can hire you, right? And that's a key piece of it all. So again, there's a policy piece, certainly, because we need to incentivize people in schools and K through 12. But to me, there's also how do we empower the individual to think concretely about, like, how do I get a ROI on whatever I do?
You know what I love about you, Lawrese? I mean, there's so many things, but one of the things that I really love about what we get to learn from you is, and this just feeds into the whole idea of an unconventional guide, is that you started in this one place and you could have just stayed focused in on that mission of the book and not going to college, other options, and you could have just stayed there. But you didn't. You evaluated and assessed, and you're like, all right, this isn't enough. Like, this only got us here. I got to take it to the next level. I can't wait to see when you get all of this information, where you're going to take it next, because it's because of your whole approach and view on this that is going to drive the success behind the work that you're doing, is because it is an ever evolving conversation and journey. It's not yep, I did this and this is where I'm going to stay because this is my comfort level. So I love what
in our 20-minute debrief here, she's talked about every topic under the sun, so it's action-packed.
Yes, we have to have Lawrese back this season to really delve into all of this.
Please, will you come back? Will you come back?
Yeah, would you come back with us?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Linda, there's a lot here. We are also in a changing economy. Just an aging demographic wise, right? There's the aging population. Then people are saying like, oh, why are the young people moving to California? Right. I think is the second largest state they're moving to because the cost of living is so high. And now we're talking about, well, at the beginning of your career, there's trade-offs you're willing to make that you won't make at the end. You don't mind.
Right.
But then you get older and you're like, send me someplace where the grocery store is not my life.
Yes. No, it's so true.
Mortgage,
we're going through that now, kind of like thinking about where is it and what's important to us today, which was different than what was important to us, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So
it evolves.
No, you're absolutely right. You were just doing
if our audience
things, Lawrese. I'm so excited for this work you're doing.
And the energy and the perspective, and we're both, Linda and I, care about education and what we do with our practices and what we do in partnership in our business life, as well as in this unconventional guide. If there's somebody in the audience that we could target for you with your message, if there's something we can do here, what would that be? And how can we, who do you want to talk to today? And maybe we can take this link and fire it right off to them. Who's your, tell us
So people in workforce development, but specifically, I'm now looking at companies who are struggling with an early career pipeline. There's simply some jobs people just don't know about, and they're not going to, right? So I'll give an anecdotal piece. Often when people think of healthcare, they think of doctor, but they don't think of radiation tech or phlebotomist. Or even when people think of climate, right? There's marine biology, but then there's also arborists. There is also people who, wind turbine
horticulturist. Yep.
Yeah.
Culture, exactly. And so
horticulturist.
Horticulturist, yes.
Yep.
There are people who are now, in terms of strategic planning and allocation of resources, they know their productivity is going to decline because they can't find the talent. That's who I want to come to me, because then we get to have a meaningful conversation about, this job doesn't require a 4-year college degree. What are the skills that go into it? And then how do we create those inroads so that you actually build a pipeline of students who are aware of your services, who are aware of the jobs that you have and have the experiences that go along with it.
I love it.
I think what is that? Is that recruitment? Is that HR? Is that anybody in strategic planning in an industry?
And even in government,
strategic planning in the industry
too. There's a lot of that with around the workforce development piece of it, and you're absolutely right. But yes, recruitment, human resources, all of those, as they're thinking about building out intern programs and doing development programs, because there's a lot of conversation around that in the workforce today. And so I totally agree. That's a great place for us to target.
So we have a couple we have a couple. Let me expand on that just for another notion for our listeners and for you. There's a lot of federal funded programs in school districts called urban technology programs, and they're IT related, where they're often training and teaching students who didn't go to college to certify in certain things and understand business for their next move. It's almost like between community college, it's community college career versus anyway, these programs are all over the place, and I'm actually connected to a few of them with my client base. So when we talk, and we can talk offline, I can start to introduce some of those folks to you and see if that makes a difference in your efforts. But urban technology programs, IT-related programs that are typically federally funded, they're policy-based, and they help students figure things out and still find success in their career. Yeah.
Absolutely. That would be great, because what I'm realizing is, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, my theory of change doesn't involve adults. I was like, by the time I think we get to adulthood, I think we would have one too many.
You are not wasting your time with Linda and I. Don't say that.
No, but it's true.
I think you all survive, right? You all survive. You're thriving. But no, think about it, right? By the time you get into adulthood, you done one too many rejections or heartbreaks that you may not have gotten over, right? Maybe they gave you a little bit of knock to your self-esteem. We all, just like Linda, you said, when you thought about what you wanted to be, and then you're like, wait a minute, everybody doesn't take those transitions well. And so to me, sometimes going to adults, there's this, well, this was the way I had to do it. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that's the way everybody else has to do it. And I'm always cautious of when I hear that. So for me, the theory of change, I was like, I'm with the students. So when it comes towards understanding the students, their both anecdotally and empirically, like their behaviors, what they're thinking about, how they view the world, which is very different than previously. That's where I am, and that's where I bring the most value at is, again, how do we get understand these opportunities?
I love it.
So,
this is great.
Clearly stated.
Oh my goodness,
I love it.
I'm so glad that we got to have you back and just give us a quick update on everything that's going on. You're always doing amazing work out there. We will definitely have you back this season because I want to hear more about all of the work that you've got going on. But it was so great to just have a chance to catch up with you and just like scratch the surface on the work that you're continuing with.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're honored to have you. Absolutely. Yeah, honored to have you. Thank you for being here and sharing your message. And we're going to get that update out and see you in a couple months.
For sure.
Weeks.
Yes. Thanks,
next
everyone.
Episode.
Yes. I hope you guys have a
great
rest of your day and really appreciate it. An Unconventional Guide to Success is an inspirational, motivated series hosted by Scott Montgomery and Linda Misegatis, recorded on Riverside.fm. Music, editing, and production by Logan Misegatis. Check out Scott Montgomery's new book, How Did You Get Here, and all the helpful related materials at www.howdidyougethere.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is in the show notes.